After hearing 4 days of arguments and testimony, it only took the jury about an hour to convict Steve Shand and Harshkumar Patel. Shand and Patel are the human smugglers whose actions contributed to the deaths of a family of 4 from India. The Patel family, no relation, by the way, to Harshkumar Patel, were sent across a snowy Manitoba field during a January blizzard in 2022. They were trying to cross from our province into Minnesota. Jagdish Patel, his wife Vaishaliband, their 11-year-old daughter Vyangi, and their 3-year-old son Dharmeek all died. They froze to death trying to find the van that was driven by Steve Shand, who was sent to pick them up. CBC's Caitlin Garlick has been in Fergus Falls, Minnesota for the trial. She just got back over the weekend. She joins us this morning in studio with her final report on what's been happening down there. I shouldn't say final, but maybe final for this stretch. Hi there.
Good morning.
So can you tell us about some of the evidence that was presented by prosecutors in the case, Caitlin?
Yeah, so first of all, there were records, things that they said showed kind of the when and where of where the accused organized or made these smuggling trips. And I'll remind our listeners, too, that that wasn't just the trip where the Patel family died. There were several others kind of in the weeks leading up to that as well with other people. So that evidence included things like cell phone location data, there was flight records, car rental records, bank records showing large deposits being made, sort of a bunch of little things that prosecutors used to piece together this story of what happened. We also saw text and WhatsApp messages between the two accused. So that showed both when these trips were happening, because we saw messages that were exchanged kind of around the same dates as these flights and car rentals and trips to and from the borders, but it also showed what they were talking about. So that included discussions about the extreme cold conditions back in December of 2021, January 2022. And as early as the very first trip in December, we see one of the accused say to the other, "Are they going to be alive when they get here?" We also see Google Translate searches from Steve Shand's phone around one of the trips before the Patel family died. And it translates several messages into Hindi saying things like, "I think she may be hypothermic." So it suggests kind of even on those previous smuggling trips before the Patels froze to death, the smugglers knew the risks of the cold because they saw them really play out right in front of them, right? We also saw photos, so including one of the survivors of that group who crossed with the Patel family, who had really serious frostbite, discoloration on her face, on her nose, around her eyes, swelling in her hands, really sort of graphic photos of that. And we saw photos of the Patel family when they were alive and also then in the area where they were found, which was really one of the more heartbreaking parts of a pretty difficult trial. We saw Jagdish, the dad, with his kids. He was kind of, covering his son's face, trying to protect him from the cold. We saw the 3-year-old wrapped in a blanket with like ducks and stars on it. Not a warm blanket, just a regular kid's blanket. And the dad's jacket was open, like he maybe was trying to protect his son from the cold, right? And then a little ways away from that, too, we saw the mom, Vaishali, near a fence and sort of slumped over. There was a building on the other side, as if maybe she'd wandered away trying to find help for her family and just wasn't able to do that. And the photos also show clearly that none of them were properly dressed for the cold they were all in. We know that the autopsies determined all 4 died from hypothermia, and the forensic pathologist from Winnipeg who testified at the trial said that the family's bodies were so frozen that it was days before the autopsies could even be performed.
I have goosebumps listening to you describe all of this. It's so sad. What did we hear from some of the witnesses who testified during the trial?
So there were a lot of different witnesses, a lot of different types of witnesses. We heard from different law enforcement who either responded to the scene at the border, who found the Patels there, who later investigated the smuggling ring. And they all sort of detailed how they pieced this story together. We also heard, though, from a couple of other witnesses who shed some light on what happened the night the Patel family died. One of those people actually was a convicted human smuggler, someone who was involved in similar operations, Rajinder Pal Singh. He says he ran a smuggling operation in BC, so separate from this one. But he said that around the time the Patel family was brought to the Manitoba border, he was in touch with another smuggler named Fennel Patel, who he says brought the family to the border that night. And Singh told the court that Fennel Patel told him the Patel family called him for help, and he told them to turn around that night, go back to Canada. Nobody went to save them, though. We also heard from one of the survivors, so somebody else who was with the group the Patel family was with that night, Yash Patel. So he was dropped at the border with the Patels to cross over that night. And he actually did make it over to the vehicle that was supposed to pick them up, which was driven by Steve Shand. And he talked about how quickly the group got separated in the blizzard that night, right? How bad the conditions were and how scared he was, but how he knew he just had to keep walking to try to make it to the vehicle waiting on the other side of the border, and how somehow he was able to find it.
What kind of evidence or arguments did the defense then try and mount for Steve Shand and for Harsh Kumar Patel?
So neither defense presented any evidence of its own, and neither of the accused chose to testify, but we know they both pleaded not guilty, right? So we did hear arguments about what they say really happened, and it was two very different stories. So we'll start with Steve Shand. He was the driver who was arrested near the border the same day the Patel family was found. And he also had Yash Patel and another of the migrants in his van at that time. His lawyers say he was a cab driver in Florida who basically just got duped by his co-accused into participating in the smuggling scheme. They said he was offered a chance to make some money driving people for Harsh Kumar Patel, and he just didn't realize what was really happening until it was too late. And Harsh Kumar Patel, on the other hand, his lawyers told a totally different story. They say he was misidentified and wrongfully accused of being part of the smuggling ring. So I'll remind our listeners, too, that he was only arrested actually earlier this year. And his lawyers said that unlike with Steve Shand, there was no evidence presented that Harsh Kumar Patel was ever near the border. And his lawyers also said that prosecutors were wrong in alleging a contact saved in Steve Shand's phone was him. So the contact for that person in the phone wasn't a real name. It was saved as Dirty Harry. But that's who all those text messages were with around the smuggling trips. Prosecutors provided evidence, though, that Harsh Kumar Patel had previously used that same phone number on a government document. So that was sort of part of how they linked him to the smuggling operation.
You also, Caitlin, spoke to one of the jurors outside of the courthouse. What did he tell you?
So that man's name was Kevin Paul, and he sounded like he just, and along with the other jurors as well, it sounded like they were just really convinced by the evidence the prosecutors presented. He said there wasn't really a ton to discuss. And he also noted that all of the jurors in that room were really moved and just saddened by the Patel family story. He said that he grew up in North Dakota, so sort of a similar area, similar climate near the border. And so he said he knows how brutal the winters there can be. And he said, I just couldn't imagine having to do what they did out there that night. So he said he really did feel that justice was served in this case.
So U.S. justice officials speaking after the verdict, what did they say?
So one of the people we heard from was a Homeland Security special agent, and she really talked about how this case, she said, is a stark reminder of some of the horrific realities faced by victims of human smuggling, like we heard about with the Patel family. And she said for her, the case really underscores the urgent need for law enforcement to work together on investigating schemes like this. Another official we heard from really just tore into the smugglers and others like them for what they did. And as prosecutors described all through the trial, that is putting profit above people's lives in a scheme that we know pulled in thousands of dollars. And we heard, that they knew the risks of the cold. We saw their texts. We know they saw those risks and consequences up close, and they never called for help. They never called it off. Here's Andrew Luger, the U.S. Attorney for the U.S. District of Minnesota, talking more about that.
This trial exposed the unthinkable cruelty of human smuggling and of those criminal organizations that value profit and greed over humanity. To earn a few $1,000s, these traffickers put men, women, and children in extraordinary peril, leading to the horrific and tragic deaths of an entire family. Because of this unimaginable greed, a father, a mother, and 2 children froze to death in sub-zero temperatures on the Minnesota-Canadian border. Our office prosecutes crimes every day, but what was revealed in this trial goes far beyond even some of the most significant criminal behavior we have seen and we have addressed. The words immoral depravity are the best that I have to describe the conduct that led to this terrible, terrible result.
What about the defense attorneys, Caitlin? How did they respond to the verdict?
Steve Shand's lawyer didn't want to talk to media on Friday, but we did briefly talk to Harsh Kumar Patel's lawyer. He says he's disappointed in the verdict, but he sort of hinted at considering appealing it. So we'll see how that goes moving forward.
What is next in the case that we understand already?
So for now, Harshkumar Patel remains in custody, and he has been in custody since his arrest earlier this year. We saw him brought into court in handcuffs every day last week. Steve Shand, though, meanwhile, remains out of custody. He was released shortly after his arrest in 2022, and the judge said Friday he had no concerns about him abiding by his conditions. So over the next few months, there will be what's called a pre-sentence investigation done, and a pre-sentence report produced for each of those accused to sort of help inform what kind of sentence they should get. A sentencing date for both of them has been set for March, but it sounds like that could change. And the U.S. Attorney's Office told us there's a real range of maximum sentences for the charges involved here. So some have a maximum of 5 years, but some can be more like 10 or 20 years on the high end. But we do know prosecutors on Friday wouldn't say exactly what sentences they'll be seeking for these two men. We also know there are still questions about Shand and Patel's co-conspirators here in Canada. RCMP say that investigation is still ongoing, and no word yet really on whether that involves that other smuggler who the trial last week heard the Patel family called for help the night they froze to death. We do know the CBC's Fifth Estate found that man, Fennel Patel, who I should note also is not related to the Patel family. It's just quite a common name in India. Fifth Estate found him about a year ago living just outside Toronto, freely. Indian police alleged Fennel Patel was part of the smuggling network that led to the Patel family's deaths, and police in that country said last year they'd begun the process to extradite that man and another Canadian man to face charges, but so far there have been no charges in Canada.
Lots of details to get through, and of course lots of emotion as well. Thank you very much for all of your important work. Really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
That is the CBC's Caitlin Gowerlek, reporter with CBC Manitoba. She's back from Fergus Falls where she was covering this trial. You can read her pieces, and please do at cbc.ca/Manitoba. Next on the program, a story about money, or maybe a lack of money. $23.4 million is how much the city of Winnipeg estimates its deficit for this year is. And while that's an improvement from the projected $40 million deficit we saw in June, it is still an increase from the deficit forecast given in the last financial update just this fall. Now, typically the city would dip into the Fiscal Stabilization Reserve Fund, also known as the Rainy Day Fund, to balance the budget, right? But that fund is dry. Councilor Jeff Bowaty is Finance Committee Chair. He says that in his 18 years on council, this is the first time he has seen the reserve fund drop to zero. And now he warns that not only is the city in a sticky situation, but it means that this is uncharted territory. And Councilor Bowaty is here live in our CBC studio. Good morning.
Good morning, Marcy.
So you've never seen this in 18 years. What are you thinking about?
Well, I think highlights the fact that we've done a lot of things in the last number of years. I mean, COVID was a financial strain on us, without a doubt. Revenues came down, expenses were up. We have to continue operating our firefighters for our firefighting service, for example, and we had to bring in a lot of people on overtime. You've got somebody sick in your household, for distancing rules and stuff. People had to stay home. So now that we've passed on those, COVID is basically more or less done. We are still experiencing a lot of problems.
A lot of problems, meaning what? How did the fund get drained solely because of COVID, or what other pressures were there financially on the city?
Well, again, we've been looking for a new funding formula, and the province, even in the last budget, was talking about a new deal for municipalities. In the last 3 years, Winnipeg has seen about 65,000 new people. I mean, in my lifetime, that's growth that we've never seen. But our revenues don't come up as quite as fast, whereas more people are spending more money, more sales tax. People are working, they're paying more income tax. The property taxes don't move up quite as quickly, so that's sort of the delay, and it's not even necessarily coming. So that's why we're really looking for a growth revenue from the province. The Association of Manitoba Municipalities starts their meetings today, and certainly that's what we'll be asking the province for. You
said tax revenues could help, but they're not necessarily coming. What does that mean, especially because the mayor ran on raising taxes to bring in money?
Right. I mean, again, Mayor Gillingham ran on a 3.5% property tax increase, but what we're seeing in a lot of the things that we're procuring, the rates are going up faster than that. A typical pumper truck that may have been firefighting pumper truck, which was say $650,000-$700,000, $1.1 million. Contracts for various services going up, labor costs going up, equipment going up far faster than inflation. I mean, right now, I don't know if you've taken a trip down to Grand Forks or Fargo lately, your dollar doesn't go as far. When you're buying a lot of this heavy specialized equipment, it's in US dollars. Lots of things are costing more right now.
So that all of those things have put pressure to get the rainy day fund to zero. This couldn't have come as a surprise to you, though, as finance chair, and given that you've been on council for 18 years, you must have seen this coming. Like, how quickly did this get to zero? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, I guess a number of factors. I mean, okay, COVID was part of it. Since then, there's been runaway inflation. We've done some things thinking that, hey, the government was changing. We were expecting perhaps maybe a little bit of a windfall. We knew that they're not necessarily flush with cash down on Broadway, but we were hoping that there was going to be maybe a little more help on the operating side on an ongoing basis. So we've made some assumptions and sort of put off some tough decisions, I'd argue, to this point. So, for example, Transit has been telling us we're overestimating their revenue by $5 million. We're underfunding snow clearing and ice control costs. We saw what happened over last winter, this spring, how bad the roads were. Mm-hmm. We spent a lot of money on road maintenance and pothole repairs this spring, more so than normal. So it's a collection of things that have to get done. I mean, just because, the snow is going to fall eventually, we're going to clean the snow. We are looking at some pickups, hopefully, in the last 2 months of this year in that regard, but not enough. I mean, right now, even if we blew the entire fiscal stabilization fund, there was a little bit left in there, about $14.3 million. We're still facing a hole to start the next year at $9.1 million. So that sort of puts us in a tough spot for 2025 already.
The deficit, although improved from the projected amount, I said this in the introduction when you were, sitting down here, but that we saw in June, it's still higher than $19.2 million deficit forecast in that last update, right? Delivered in September. How did we get to $23.4 million then? What? So quickly, is it what you were saying, that some spending has happened that you thought the province may help out with, and maybe that didn't come through? Right.
I mean, you could argue, if you looked at our budget right now, we should be putting money back into the rainy day fund to get it back up to its level of $81.3 million, which 6% of our operating budget, which should be in there. Plus, we're making some assumptions right now that I've mentioned that are not real. That those assumptions we're saying are annually about $80 million. We're asking different departments to come up with savings that they can't realistically find. Fire paramedic service, we asked them to find $3 million of efficiencies. Really tough. One of the things, they're one of the biggest challenges right now. The deficit there is about $13.1 million. Lots of overtime, lots of workers' compensation claims. I've tried to drill into it. Are people just not showing up? Is there some, management problem there? I don't think that's really the case. It seems like, 20 years ago, we had 1.29 firefighters for every person that truck that needs to be filled throughout the system. It's a 24-hour operation. What's happened, though, is a lot more people are on long-term disability, on workers' compensation, and we're not backfilling for those. In the past, firefighters were firemen, and maternal leave, but parental leave is a much more common thing. So I think it's perhaps time, we may save some money by hiring more permanent full-time employees in the fire department, but we need to get to that point first. Okay, you're raising the parental leave because if you do have women firefighters, if they are the ones to take parental leave, anyone can, but it's often women that will take at least part of the time, that you're also, those positions are needing to be backfilled. Right, and my conversations with the union and that, it's definitely a lot, it's happening more. It's not a bad thing in the least, but it's 20 years. Yeah. In 20 years, it's changed. The demographics have changed. What do you do beyond increasing taxes? I mean, what in your sense can be done to fix this? You've said you've talked to different departments to try to find efficiencies, but you feel like they're already running lean. Yeah, I mean, we look at other cities. Their property tax increases have been far more substantial than ours. The city of Brandon is up around 9%, Edmonton 9%, Calgary's had many years at 6, 7, 8%. So it's going to be a challenge. I'll let your listeners know this is new information here for you today, breaking on CBC. We will be tabling the 2025 multi-year budget update on Wednesday, December 11th. So at that point, we'll know a lot of what the decisions we're trying to make to move forward are. I feel like you are giving us a preview that our taxes could be going up. Is there a proposal for tax increase in there? Again, we're going to have to wait till December 11th. It's the last thing I want to do. We've got a lot of challenges and a lot of expenses. And, even beyond the property taxes, we have, multi-billion-dollar upgrade of our sewage treatment plant. There, I think we are seeing some progress with our discussions on the province in terms of getting the funding we need to upgrade the multi-billion-dollar sewage treatment plant. Without their funding, the federal government's funding, people's water and sewer bills could actually be more than their property taxes. So there are a lot of challenges at the city. In terms of what's coming in that December 11th update as well, is there any hope for the what you've been waiting for between now and then for the province to come forward and say, we figured it out, we have a new, more stable funding formula that's coming through to you? Yeah, I'm not holding my breath right now. I mean, again, we just saw a throne speech last week. There was no indication of any,
There
meat on it.
wasn't. Yeah.
I mean, it is great that the multi-year funding freeze was ended. When we did the multi-year budget, we estimated a 2.5% range to be conservative because we thought that was going to be the worst case scenario. They've come in only at 2%. The costs that we have at the city hall in terms of emergency services, the equipment that we're buying, 2% really does not cover our increasing costs.
How might all this directly impact Winnipeggers in their daily lives? I mean, even beyond taxes, should they rise? Even the things you're talking about, trying to find backfill for some of those, emergent services and responses, trying to figure out how to, you're asking departments to find efficiencies. You're saying they're already, there's not much to find. So are we going to be potentially seeing some cuts to departments then, or cuts to services?
That's not where we really want to go. I mean, I am looking around, I see city fleet vehicles and I go, oh, that's more rusted out than my car. We are trying to stretch as a household would do. We try to stretch the best that we can out of the resources we have. There were maybe a couple swimming pools where, we had one pool closed and we increased the hours somewhere else and we didn't reduce them after the fact because, they were just so well used. We may have to go and reevaluate those decisions. We're not looking at closing or cutting anything from where it has been in the past, but we have challenges.
You're really in the weeds of trying to find, if you're talking about changing hours at facilities, you're really trying to find.
We're looking for help across the board. And again, like I say, not replacing fleet vehicles, but on the emergency side, I mean, you've got, ladder trucks. You want to make sure that those ladder trucks work in a time of need. So we're making sure that those, priority pieces do get replaced.
December 11th, it sounds like we'll invite you back to the studio. Jeff Bowaty, thank you.
Thanks, Marcy.
That is Jeff Bowaty, councillor and the city's Finance Committee Chair, live here on CBC.
Hi, my name is Vincent Campbell. I'm from the West End, and this is Manitoba.
Well, if you commute by foot, isn't it nice when you have a warm pair of boots and a place to wiggle your toes safely? A lot of people in our community don't have that. As temperatures continue to drop, many of us are swapping our favorite fall gear for those winter necessities. For 6 years, Warm Boots, Warm Hearts has been helping Winnipeggers access new and gently used winter boots. They just gave away pair number 1,000. It's a milestone for the small charity, but founder Robin Brown says it's also a bittersweet moment, and she's with us via Zoom this morning. Hello to you.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being with us. So tell me about feeling bittersweet about this.
Yeah, it's bittersweet because in a perfect world, a program like ours wouldn't have to exist. We always wish that everyone had the capacity to have a pair of warm, sturdy footwear to keep them, warm all winter. But the reality is there's a lot of folks that are in need for different reasons. So we started our boot drive sort of by accident in 2019, and we celebrate the milestone now. Instead of looking at how many people we've had to help, we look at it as how many people we've been able to help because of all the community members that have come together to donate and support other people with us.
What led you to start this, as you said, almost by accident those years ago?
Yeah, at the time I was operating a family resource center in a school division in Winnipeg. And we had a parent call one day because there had been a big snowstorm the night before, and they asked if we happened to have any boots or ski pants to help them get their children to school because they didn't have anything available. And there was honestly too much snow to get through on foot without those items. So we didn't have anything on hand, and I went home and I kind of just went on my personal social media and asked if anyone happened to have a pair of boots or ski pants in these particular sizes. And a bunch of people wrote back, like, I don't have this size, but I have this size. Would you be able to use it? And I thought, okay, well, I'm sure I can find someone else that would use it. So I just started collecting a few pairs. And then someone said, like, oh, do you have a donation spot I can give to? And I came home and I said to my husband, I think we accidentally started a charity, but we're going to make this work. We're going to just, coordinate this. We'll do some pickups. We'll do some drop-offs. And our goal the very first year was maybe we could help 50 people. And we surpassed it right away.
What have you heard over the years about what people do in our community when they don't have boots? What do they put on their feet?
We've seen a lot of interesting people have actually shown us what they've used before they've received a pair from us. We've seen things like duct tape with garbage bags. We've seen, like those old school rubber galoshes over top of boots that have like full on, we call them talking boots, where the heels are right off the bottom. We've seen people wearing like multiple socks with different holes to try and use something like summer sandals that they will duct tape around their foot, all sorts of different things. So it's really nice that we can sort of give a sense of pride with a new pair of boots for these people to keep warm.
What sizes are most in demand? What do your needs look like?
We accept sizes from like toddler all the way up to adult, but we often find that our biggest gap is in higher youth sizes and particularly larger men's and women's sizes. We work with a lot of schools and community organizations that have like teenagers that can sometimes be as big as like a men's size 14 or 15 or a women's size 11 or 12. And they have a hard time accessing those sizes in other avenues. So we find that that's often where our demand comes in, because we have a lot of those people coming to us when they've exhausted other resources.
We should mention, obviously, we're focusing on the boots, Robin, but you guys also are in need of socks as well, right?
Yeah, we also accept new warm socks because we do like to put a couple pairs in the bags whenever we can. And we also accept hand and foot warmer packs that we'll often give out to folks to keep warm with their new boots. And we also accept new boot laces because sometimes when we get used ones, we try to relace them with a new pair just to freshen them up.
All these years later, then what's the reaction to quote unquote accidentally starting a charity? What's it given back to you to help in this way?
You know what? We started it just with our little family. We were three family members at the time. We've since welcomed our daughter, and actually our kids really help out a lot with it now. Like we have an almost 4-year-old and we have a 13-year-old. They help us with the cleaning, the packing, the deliveries. My husband does a lot of the coordinating between deliveries and pickups, and it's something we've actually started to look forward to every year as a family. And we really like being able to show our children that maybe just helping one person can really make a difference. And we hope that, that's what they grow and pass on to others too.
Where can people go if they want to help out or learn more about Warm Boots, Warm Hearts?
Yeah, we have a social media. It's at Warm Boots WPG, Warm Boots Winnipeg. We're on Instagram there, and they can find a list of places that are our donation partners where they can drop items off. They can also send us an email at warmbootswarmhearts@gmail.com, and they can ask any questions they have about donations or if someone is needing to receive a pair. And they can also send us a DM on social media as well.
Thanks a lot for this, Robin, and being up on Zoom with CBC with us early this morning. Take care. Good luck.
Thank you so much. Have a good day.
You as well. That's Robin Brown, founder of Warm Boots, Warm Hearts.